about now is a comprehensive approach that turns from an approach into action. So to start off my piece, I'd just like to cover 4 very quick points which sort of set a context from a military perspective. Time, complexity, wicked problems and drivers. With respect to time, people will say, we've been talking about this for a long time with wise pens. I remember coming to visit me when I was in my NATO hat in Naples. And people will say it's very fragmented. But the sense that I get from having seen it from both sides of the fence, if you like, is that growth of understanding and the growth of capability is slowly but surely coalescing. Maybe, as Dr. Devizan said this morning, maybe the time is now to enliven that process to make it reach coalescence more quickly. I'm talking about the MSO and operational aspects of that this afternoon. Of course, it is only a building year. Unfortunately, in April of this year, we managed to achieve it, and I'll run through some of those, some of the aspects of that in a minute. But before that, the second of my starting points is one on complexity, and I think a question raised by the Croatian rep earlier on this morning was: is the Mediterranean the centre of the EU? I would answer, from my perspective, military perspective, no, but it is, of course, a collective centre of gravity. And it is essential to our well-being. And why? Because we are a society now which is dominated by just-in-time economics. Therefore, we need constant flow of material through the maritime. We're also challenged within the EU. It's not a single-dimensional approach. It's not defence, it's not security, it's not something else. It's a multi-dimensional approach. And it's too simplistic to see all the aspects of the maritime in isolated bubbles. And indeed, I would argue, from an operator's perspective, you can't isolate the Med from the rest of the global maritime domain. So you have to look at this holistically. One also is, as an operator, posed with some diametrically opposed mandates within the multiple levers of power that are the EU. So, for instance, we've had mention of sovereignty this morning. The difference between sovereignty and pooling and sharing, the needing to share or sustaining sovereignty. Or the difference between partiality and impartiality. On one hand, you have DG ECHO, responsibility for humanitarian affairs, that clearly has to remain impartial. On the other hand, the External Action Service, responsible for delivery of members' foreign will, has to have partiality, and making those two fit the same action is difficult. And from a commercial sense, a sort of industrial sense in the maritime, the difference between commercial security and physical security is another dilemma that challenges us every day. So in essence, we have to live in a wicked world, a world dominated by wicked problems, where every problem has other issues attached to it. Everything has interconnected consequences, both intended and otherwise. And the only way to achieve a way forward on that is, and this is to a degree an anathema to the military mind, but something that I and my colleagues are gradually getting very used to, is the need to increasingly compromise and to ensure that we cooperate. And so the very theme of today seems to be focusing on the need for enhanced cooperation and compromise. The advantage, the true advantage, is the EU's truly comprehensive approach, delivering really enduring solutions. Which links me to the fourth of my starting points, that of the drivers. Why now? Why is it important? Well, I don't have to tell anybody here that money is issue. The sovereign debt crisis looms large over all of us, and that will be a driver in itself. But from an operator's perspective, one might say that there is a rapidly expanding number of bushfires, many of which are attached or associated to or with the sea, which have the potential to become forest fires if we're not careful. So let me go on to some more detail about the MSO itself. We had this verbatim read this morning. I only put it up here for completeness. But the point here is it's all very well for me to come here and say there's a maritime perspective or a military perspective. It's that military perspective woven into the whole, and woven to the whole that leads to a maritime security strategy which is both civilian and military. And importantly, that strategy is woven into the European security strategy in due course. So we're not starting with a blank piece of paper. I talked about threats and challenges. There's nothing new here, but I do raise that analogy of bushfires turning into forest fires. I would say each year on year we're seeing more exacerbation of each of these areas of concern. The global common, with its huge potential to adversely affect European health, wealth and happiness, that is the maritime, clearly needs to be fundamentally addressed if we're going to address all of these challenges I show here. But perhaps because it is so complex and because it has been so demanding, that we can understand why it has taken so long to come to a more holistic view, a more collective view. In itself, the maritime is a huge, wicked problem. I go on to talk about the EU role in this. This is straight out of the MSO concept, which was endorsed by the Military Committee and going up the chain later on this term for further endorsement. I hope. The problem is, from my perspective, I work for an external organisation. And we were talking earlier on, I think some were mentioning the aspiration of activity that is internal in nature rather than external in nature. And when it comes to the delivery of that collective external and internal action, there are some ways to go with respect to resolution of the solidarity and mutual assistance clauses that came out of Lisbon. Unsurprisingly, in the MSO document, you have a set of principles, and nothing too hugely surprising here, but they are agreed, and each of them in its own is a complex discussion which could have a seminar of its own, but all are definitely required, not cherry-picked, to be able to deliver an MSO. And when it comes to the tasks, well, the first 5 you wouldn't be surprised at. The bottom 3 are in the MSO document concept and really are the implied tasks, the be prepared to, the consequence of being in the maritime. Everyone talks about actors. These are just some of them. There's some of the players. It doesn't even really matter if you can read it or not. The point is there are so many diverse elements. We have a long way to go to weave this into a coherency. But delivering the comprehensive approach into comprehensive action, we're starting to see in the external side of life real fruit. And I suppose my best way of demonstrating comprehensiveness in action is that of the Horn of Africa as it stands now. I feel like I'll be stealing other people's sandwiches if I go too much into this. But these are all the component parts of that complete bit. And I won't spend too much time on it because I know Walter Stevens will spend more on the comprehensiveness of the Horn of Africa. But there's a lot of money that has gone into this, 1.6 billion over the last, from 2008-2013. And that isn't to force generate ships, it isn't to provide our own side's effort, whether it's delegations or bureaucracy in terms of operational headquarters or whether it's staff back here. That's money on the ground, boots on the ground, if you like, in that respect. And of course, in doing that, we don't do it alone. The comprehensive approach in all aspects of the maritime, whether it's delivering effect ashore or whether it's delivering into new activities such as UCAP Nesta, requires both partnerships with other states and organisations and also with with the corresponding mission or operation command. We are having impact, I think, is the bottom line, and a demonstration that this new system under an umbrella of a Horn of Africa strategy in which the action plan for counter-piracy is just one component part of which Atalanta does that main business, is starting to generate effect. I don't have to describe the figures, I just have to show them. And we're having as effect spreads, and a part of those implied tasks was effect ashore. That effect ashore actually translates to impact in improving security in Somalia. It's not just about training the troops, it's about supplying the troops. It's about supplying AMSOM. It's about ensuring the World Food Programme ships arrive on the station. So I hope I've not overrun my allotted time. What I've tried to give you is a sense of where, from a military perspective, there is a long way to go, but a lot of hope and a lot of encouraging process in how we're applying the comprehensive approach and putting it into comprehensive action today.
Thank you, that was very useful. Until 2006, Dr. Soren Mias was a research scientist in light modulating technologies, which I think is something to do with holograms, but I'm not quite sure. But for the last 5.5 years, he's been working with a much broader remit as the coordinator of research and technology in naval systems at the European Defence Agency. And during that period, he's overseen a significant expansion, both in breadth and depth, of naval research and technology. And he's also developed a strategic research agenda for the naval domain generally. So I'm sure that background in academia and in industry and in EDA has made him a passionate advocate for the efficient use of resources, including dual-use technologies, and an awareness of what's required across the full spectrum of security and defence.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me say it's a privilege and an honor to be here.